Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for attending this final panel session with some of our experts in supply chain management. I'll briefly introduce to our panelists before we jump on to some of the discussions which we have planned. Uh, just before I move on, my name is Dr. Abhigaj. I'm a professor of supply chain management at Cranfield University, and I'm going to be the moderator for this session. We have next to me Suleiman Nazih, who works for a global company called as Pladis as a global supply chain senior director. He has been with this role for last 3 years, but have worked for companies like 3M and Danone for over 20 years. So welcome, Suleiman. Next, we have Chris Young, who works as a head of supply chain for McDonald's. He has been working for 21 years with McDonald's, so he has got a good history of working with McDonald's, but also worked for Asta and Virgin over earlier before working for McDonald's. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
Next, we have Neha Singh, who works as the VP Global Planning Transformation at Diageo. She has been with this role for the last 5 years and has also worked in the past for companies like Unilever and Procter & Gamble before taking on this role. Welcome, Neha.
Thank you.
Next, Zoe Farnell. Sorry if I'm pronouncing it Farnley. And she is a Vice President, UK and Ireland for supply chain at PepsiCo. She has been with this role for the last 1 year, but has worked over 23 years for companies like GSK and AstraZeneca. Welcome, Zoe.
Thank you.
And finally, we have James Rosengren. He is currently working as a head of logistics and transformation at Mars for the last 3 years, and he has worked earlier for companies like Kraft, Heinz, and Infosys. So welcome, James. Thank you so much, guys, for giving your time for this panel discussion. And I'll head straight away into the set of questions which we have planned for the discussion. The first one is, let's start with, there's a lot of talk about different areas, right, from supply chain transformation, supply chain resilience, supply chain sustainability, and AI obviously is one of the areas which we have been people talking about. But let's start somewhere fundamental. What we are doing all this is to build some form of resilient capability, right? And let's try and understand what does the resilience typically mean for organizations in particularly 2026 and beyond. Is it agility? Is it adaptability? Is it like visibility as a characteristics? Or from the OpEx point of view, is it costed capacity, set of scenarios, or service promise, or something else? So let's hear from these panelists. I'll start with Neha, if you could pitch in terms of some of the examples in terms of how do you perceive resilience within your organization, and what are you doing from that point of view?
Yes, so and thank you for staying late. I think you guys love to have drinks with us later. So resilience, as a strategic resilience seems a very open-ended word. If you see from the aspect of CEOs and all, it can be anything, honestly, from the cyber attack to anything. I'll keep it within the boundaries of supply chain. One thing I observed is when it comes to resilience, it is only successful, number one, it has to be part of your day-to-day genetics of your work plan, as you say, P4G. It should not be some document which is kept in some vault to be taken out when the crisis hits you. It has to be an alive process, very much like if I am handling materials, what is my resilience for each of those materials? If I'm handling FG, what is my resilience for each of them? Then we should be defining. The second important pillar is you should be very clearly defined pillars. Your people resilience, digital resilience, your manufacturing resilience, supplier resilience, everything. It has, first time it will be a very painful process, trust me. But the moment you start making it part of your day-to-day process, genetics, it will be very easy. I can give you an example from my first company, my first alma mater, Procter & Gamble. I was handling materials in my example. It was part of my work plan to ensure that for every material I'm getting in the company, what is the option, resilience one, plan A and plan B, if something happens. And it can involve a very annual review with my suppliers. To the extent there was a standard document which were designed by P&G, and slowly we kept on modifying it. but to the extent that where is my supplier actually based? Is the supplier is based in Egypt, or a supplier in Vietnam, or in Philippines? So that the moment, I don't have to rush to collect the data when the crisis hits. Immediately, if there is a war somewhere, some attack somewhere, I know that, okay, this supplier will get hit. I have a digital roadmap of everything. I used to plot which country where my suppliers are based, and what is the risk appetite for me and for my company to manage this kind of profile. The second is, example, one material is coming from China, because my factory is based in India. That is the best optimum. China and India, everybody's taking from there. But I need to have what is my backup for this material and supplier. And then ensure if there is no supply material, see what is happening in West area, get the material qualified on your lines to run in case of crisis. See the capacity of that alternate supply. And it actually helped me. One time my supplier in China got fire. I did not have to start from scratch. Immediately, I opened my BCP plan. I said, okay, this material, this is the supplier sitting in Germany. This is the alternate lead time. I get the air freight sorted, tuck, 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 approvals. Within 5 days, my lines were again. So that is, it has to be part of your genetics versus many companies I see that there is a resilience team separately sitting out of operations trying to manage something. But when the crisis hits, please get this data, please get that data, and it becomes a unmanageable situation.
Yeah, no, indeed. No, that's helpful. Suleiman, you have some practical examples from your own organization if you'd like to share with us, please.
Absolutely. Can you- Okay. The problem that we are trying to solve in very practical terms with resilience is if something goes wrong in our supply chain, it can be either in the demand or supply space, what is our plan? And how can we just get up quickly and keep running and keep serving our customers? That's why we are doing a lot of scenario planning. And in our company, as Polaris, we are running a number of bakeries across UK, across Turkey, in MENA. And for instance, one of the practical examples that we have been looking at is if there is a fire in one of our factories in UK, and how can we just keep serving well-known McVitie's biscuits, right? So we have some similar capabilities across some of our network, but we cannot build resilience, or we cannot build, let's say, redundancy for all of our lines on all of our products. That's why I think the first thing that we have been looking at is what are the very key products from a profitability perspective, from a customer perspective. And for those products, if something goes wrong in one of our factories in UK, then where can we serve it? Do we have a backup plan from UK in another factory, or can we serve it from Europe? And that's what we are looking at internally. But on the other hand, we are also just looking at, I think many of the companies are doing it the same way, is the supplier diversification. I think this is a very well-known concept everybody's working on, not to be reliant on only one company, only one supplier, especially for the critical raw materials. So supplier diversification is another one. And the other one is just, we are trying to just produce as much as possible closer to the market where the products are consumed. So regional self-sufficiency is also another very critical element that we are trying to look at. It's not just from a cost perspective, because sometimes shipping biscuits across the world is not a logical thing because of the cost. So the cost is one element, but on the other hand, just you can be just saving yourself from, or just protecting yourself from potential tariffs.
From the ensuring and...
Or regulatory perspective, because in food regulations, regulatory is also another very critical thing. And sometimes it is difficult to develop a product regulatory-wise compliant everywhere. So sometimes improving your regional self-sufficiency is also bringing resilience.
Right. I don't want to specifically point out at Zoe and Chris, because you guys have been hearing this word for over 20 years, I suppose. So what's your take on the resilience, the strategic resilience part of your organization?
Go on, Zoe.
You sure? One of the things I was going to say is resilience is all about, we've got to think about the measurement of it. So it's all around service continuity and recovery time. It's not just about cost. So when you look at resilience of your supply chain, you've got to have that in mind. How can I still get whatever product it is to your customers, and what's that recovery time? And then you have to do things from a risk-based perspective. So you need to look across the whole end-to-end supply chain, whether it's your source, your make, your plan, your move. What does that look like? And sometimes in your companies, you won't always be able to do everything, but then you prioritize from a risk-based perspective. Look at maybe top 3, top 5, whatever you need to do in your company around each of those things from an end-to-end perspective. Because the last thing that we want is not be able to get and service our customers. So resilience has to be risk-based, because you can do absolutely everything and you can gold plate everything. You can have the most amount of inventory everywhere to really secure it, but that's not going to be effective for your business. So really think about that.
Yeah.
I think
Chris,
if
maybe.
you build resilience across your entire supply chain, you're going to double your cost, and nobody can afford to double their cost.
Yeah.
So the risk-based thing is one. Where are you likely to have issues, but it's also about what is driving your profit at the end of the day. So if you've got to combine the two. What's going to be risky, and also what's going to be driving your profit, or what drives your profit, and you need to merge those two together and prioritize like that.
Yeah, no, that's quite helpful. I'm sure some of you might have started hearing the word called as polycrisis. Now, what does it really mean is the combination of risks and disruptions what we are seeing in today's world, ranging from cyber security to geopolitical to climate change to COVID we had just recently, and there's on and on with the increased frequency and an impact. But then I just want to hear from, again, like maybe Chris and Zoe, and others can pitch in if you like, a specific risk mitigation strategy to the examples or scenarios what you are faced with in your organization. If you could share some of your thoughts on those.
Yeah, so I'm not going to give. I don't think there's an answer that solves everything, right? So this is, when you look at a polycrisis, it's loads of things coming together, and there isn't going to be one thing that solves lots of things coming together. But for us, we certainly moved from contingency planning to multi-scenario planning, multi-market, multi-category, and for those that were here for the presentation this morning, we all went through, for those of us in supply chain for at least 15 plus years, we all went through consolidation, globalization, right? Let's try to simplify, let's try to go down to single lines of supply, let's try to put volumes together, and that drives efficiency. But that was during a time when things were much more stable, right? And I think it was said this morning that we're now kind of going back to a sort of semi-localization, so that things are a bit closer to home. So we're definitely going through at McDonald's, multi-scenario planning, a little bit of localization, a little bit of dual supply. But I think the other thing that's important as well in a crisis is how you react to a crisis, okay? And that means that you need to make accurate decisions and you need to make fast decisions. So it is really important that within your organizations, it's clear what your decision-making rights are. And that's what we've been going through. And I think, hopefully you won't see a McDonald's anywhere near you that's run out of product too often.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Zoe and James, if you would like to.
Yeah, brilliant. So although I've come from PepsiCo, I'm going to use an example from a pharmaceutical. So everyone in here remember COVID? Maybe you want to blank it out. So I joined AstraZeneca, and 4 weeks into me starting to run the whole supply chain transformation, the world shut down in COVID. And AstraZeneca was also tasked with the mission to align with the university to get a product to market as quick as we could to get the world moving. There was lots of different technologies. We didn't have the vaccine technology, but we knew how to do supply chain. And as a company, we were tasked to set up supply chain in every country, working that through with CMOs. So we had the knowledge of how to do small vaccines because we do the flu vaccine, but we had to do it in Europe, in America, et cetera, and we had to knit together contract manufacturing organization from a step-by-step to be able to get product to market in 6 months. And we had to do that from laboratory manufacturing to scale up and get in the theoretical yield versus what you actually get when you first start manufacturing. With the pressure on the news day by day that people were dying of COVID and we needed to get the world moving. So whether you believe in the vaccine or not, from a supply chain perspective, we did that. We had to knit it all together. We had to do risk management. We had to discuss things with the government. You've got the WHO that was looking globally around the different manufacturers of the vaccine. And there was a new technology that was coming out there, but that had to be stored at minus 20 degrees, okay? The AstraZeneca and the Oxford vaccine could be at 2 to 7 degrees, which is just refrigerated. So we had to get product to every single country because you can't be able to get a cold chain at minus 20 degrees everywhere around the world. So not only did we have to look at the manufacturing side, we also had to look at the logistics side and also work with government, work with everybody to just take over hospitals and stadiums to have enough fridges to be able to provide the product to patients, and then work with the NHS. So that, I would say, was living through having to take a problem, working through what we had to do, and actually delivering to get the world moving for all the other vaccines to come in place to enable everybody to move on. So that's my story.
No, that's helpful. Quite relevant example what we have seen from the vaccine supply chain perspective. James, if you've got something quickly from the Mars point of view, please.
For sure. I think both questions flow into one to an extent, right? Which is how do you respond or handle a polycrisis well with resilience? Yeah. And what is resilience? Well, I think they summarize it well. And to sum that up, resilience as a company is existing tomorrow. How do you do that? You make profit. Even if you're a not-for-profit, which I don't think many of us are in this room, you still make that money. You just don't keep it, right? So I think driving profitability, every decision you make funnels up to that overall profitability outcome, whether it's sales, supply chain, marketing, finance. We all have to make this business profitable tomorrow, the day after. And if you believe in your product and you want it to be resilient, it has to be on the shelf and you have to make money to do that. And then as it flows into a polycrisis, the area I think that is underinvested in and not focused on enough is talent and people. I think you can do everything else right, but if you don't have the right resource and the right talent in place to deal with it, you don't have the agility of thinking, you don't have the agility of action. We are not robotic-led companies yet. Yeah. We still do have humans at the center, and as a result, I think empowering and getting the right people in place with the right tool set to make them capable is how you unlock agility within a polycrisis.
Yeah. No, that's helpful, and clearly we are already seeing a new terminology to the resilience is the adaptability. How can we actually better adapt to the changing environment is becoming a focus. So I'm going to quickly move on to the next topic with respect to this whole world of digitalization and artificial intelligence is with this decision velocity rising primarily due to the AI and digitalization, what decisions are you comfortable the agentic AI or AI systems to take, and what are the decisions you would still keep it with humans? So let me start with maybe James and then follow on Zoe if you've got any thoughts on it, please.
I'm a big believer of, we had a good discussion with some stakeholders last night, including yourself, which is AI is a buzzword at the moment. It's very sexy. What does it actually mean? How do we actually embed it into a business that isn't starting from scratch with a lot of backing or funding? For me, it's automate the steps, not the accountability. So everyone talks about how AI can make decisions. What decision should AI make? I think it's more so, how does AI allow us to make faster decisions? So it's unlocking that speed. I think for now, at least with the technology we have and the technology we understand, for most lay people working with this technology, is how do we control the inputs and the outputs of a decision and automate the steps in between with the guardrails that we've created. So we're confident that what might take 3 months normally, if you've created the right guardrails, the right rules and checks and balances for the 3-month process, and you do it in 3 minutes with artificial intelligence or some kind of digital transformation or software, if you're confident in those guardrails, you're confident in the input you put into it, then you can make a confident decision on the output you have as a result.
No, that's definitely. So humans in loop is quite critical, definitely. Like that's the kind of message. But Zoe, if you have got any thoughts on that.
If you think of it in terms of a graph, and you've got humans and you've got the systems, etc., it's a journey all the way through. So one of the buzzwords is decision intelligence, right? And it's going to take a journey to get there, and it's going to be kind of hand in hand. Your machine or your systems are going to be put in place, but the foundation of that is data, right? If you haven't got the right data in there, you're never going to trust it. You're never going to be actually turn around and say, yes, I'm going to allow it to make all the decisions. But then you've got to get the human to actually learn how the systems work, whether it's a planning system, whether it's S4HANA, etc. You've got to have the backbone, data first, then the system. And then it's a journey to look through, okay, well, then you first start saying that there's a problem, okay? It's identifying a problem, okay? Basic. Then you have to go to diagnostics. So here's the problem, and this is what we think is why. Okay, so the human can then step in and say, right, what do we need to do? A, B, C, and D. Then as you move up towards decision intelligence, you've got something in terms of you've got the diagnostic, and then whether it's your robotic process automation, whether it's AI, whether it's whatever you want to do in solvers in your systems, it will say, this is the problem, you can do A, B, or C, but the human will then have to come in and make the decision. It's not until you go all the way on the journey that you then start to say, here's the guardrails, as you say, okay, machine, you are now empowered to, you say this, here's the solve, and let's go on and do it. So it's there, but it's going to take a long time to get there from a data perspective.
Jump in,
I just
please.
wanted to add
Yes.
something to Zoe's answer. So actually, I also think it's about the appetite for the blast radius of the decision. You know, like if you see a value chain, for each decision which you are giving to AI to take, how much is the appetite to, what is the blast radius? If it goes, it fails, how much can you digest? At the same time, like the criticality, how fast you need decision and how many complex inputs are there. So there's a very nice model which shows that AI has 3 stages. AI can be your assistant, where like a Siri and Alexa kind of stuff, you are telling it is doing. Second can be AI can be a partner. It is analyzing like demand planning tools, Kinaxis and all. It gives you, and now it is you to decide whether you want to take, not take, override it. And then AI can be a decision maker. And investment banking, I think medical research, they are giving that power to AI. Because investment banking, if you give a person sometimes very complex models, it will run like 6 months. They don't have that much time. So depending upon your appetite to absorb those decisions, you can choose the model and you can choose where you want to be in this whole scheme of things. Like supply chain in general has only the appetite to give demand planning and distribution planning to AI so far, quite independently. Your material planning, this is still, even though many companies are selling the models where multiple agents, if they start working together, honestly, if your demand planning agent, your material planning agent, and all agents in the AI, they start working together, all the boundaries of a process will go out. Then this whole system of agents will work together and run the supply chain. But I don't think many companies had the appetite to, take that yet. So demand planning is something, and distribution planning where people are still playing around with AI.
Yeah, I think until the time comes where we can all delegate our results accountability to AI, then
Yeah.
we need to be involved and we need to be making those decisions, what we allow AI to do and what we don't.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. The one key takeaway from this is like all the monotonous day-to-day operations can be pretty much handed over to AI. But if there is any kind of like change or disruption, what you're going to see, we need to have human intervention in those decision making. So that's quite helpful. So let me move on to a very relevant question, because we are trying to build the skills now for AI and digitalization. So what kind of skills do you think are needed or to be developed for this fast-growing supply chain, AI-driven supply chain environment? So, any thoughts, Suleiman, if you'd like to start with, and then open floor for others to discuss.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I think this is very linked to the previous question, because in a very fast-growing supply chain environment, I think we need digital dexterity blended with the human intelligence, right? So we cannot just delegate everything to AI. That's why we still need human intelligence. And I think for me, one of the critical things in this area from just like a skills perspective is to be able to make decisions under uncertainty. Because as we all know that we are in a very volatile just times, we call it like VUCA, which we hear almost every day, geopolitical tensions and the wars and just increasing commodity prices. So it's making the life very difficult for supply chain professionals, and we don't have all the answers and all the data ready. So I think we need people who are confident to make decisions with limited data and under a limited time. So I think that's one of the very critical thing. And in order to do that, I think we need to build some skills like scenario planning. We need to be able to quantify our decisions, because sometimes we speak a lot about tones, the number of cases, but we also need to be able to translate into the commercial outcomes. And the other thing is, as I said, we need like a just blend of digital and human insight. And we still need people to know the digital, how the systems work, but we don't want everybody to be like the the AI engineers.
Yeah,
Or just,
definitely.
so, but I think we all need to know how end-to-end supply chain works, starting from our consumers all the way down to our tier 2 suppliers. And
Subject expertise is quite critical
Subject
as well.
expert-
Like you can't simply use AI systems to do everything if the AI systems are not going to
And I
understand.
think we need to be able, we need to have the skill to challenge the outcome of the AI.
Yeah.
And that's why we need to know what we are working on,
Yeah.
because we cannot delegate, as Chris said, just until we can delegate 100% to AI, we are still the ones taking the decision. But we need,
Yeah, no, indeed, yeah.
yeah, but we need to be able to understand if the system is creating any hallucination.
Yeah.
And then we need to know and just correct it. We cannot just let it go. And the last point for me is like, I think collaboration is becoming more important. Many organizations can have still the functional silos or just departments or regions. I think we need to be more influential, and we need to be able to work with different functions. We need to be able to solve frictions whenever it happens.
Right.
So I think we need to be, because sometimes we are not managing big teams, we need to be just showing and using our expertise to solve some problems.
Yeah.
I think for me, those are
Yeah, those are the ones, right. James, you are probably one of the youngest in this panel, and what's your take on this one? Like,
Just good skincare. I think creative problem solving is one of the key skill sets we need. I think our young people who are coming up through our businesses, sure, digitally savvy, all those things are a baseline, digitally savvy, understand the tech, understand the business. I think that creative problem solving, how do you just solve a problem, right? With AI, you're losing some of that skill set when you're doing a assignment at high school, and you're doing it with AI now. And so some of these skills we are losing, and we haven't had the 20, 30, 40, 80-year period to realize what we've lost and how we regain it yet. So I think the businesses that empower their young people and growing talent for the future to learn how to problem solve still, sometimes even if it's at the sacrifice of efficiency, it's a longer term payoff. And then the other side of it is, as we have less and less day-to-day job, you could call it, from a when you do become more efficient, it's cross-functional collaboration. I come back to profit, and I talk about it a lot with my businesses, because if we don't have profit, we don't exist. And if we don't exist, it's not fun. So I think ensuring our young people and our talent that grows has the ability to work across the business will empower them to be more useful in the future.
I liked one of your point, James, is the skill loss. And this is going to be one of the major disadvantages of using AI, because even at a university level, like I get assignments submitted through ChatGPT, and I start asking myself a question: should I be really reading this assignment, or ask ChatGPT to really mark it? So it's quite a difficult scenario. Neha, if you could quickly pick up on those skills requirement, please.
See, I'm a firm believer, maybe you called us old, so I'll say firm believer that operational experience is very much important. What I learned in my, working in the factory floor and all, nothing can match that. But now, as when I have to solve any problem, I need to be capable enough to think digitally versus thinking with a traditional RCA route and charts and flow charts. So something have the operational experience of supply chain, but think digitally. At the same time, one element which I learned recently was an eye opener is ESG. Because honestly, when ESG came under my umbrella in digitization, I thought like I've never worked ESG, I'm not an expert. But then I realized actually it should be married in every step we do in supply chain. It is not a responsibility of people to just create reports to meet all these Paris conference or whatever, companies reports. But at the same time, when you start broadening your learning in supply chain on what's happening in ESG, it is like eye-opening. How you select your vendors, not only based on the cost, but also how much carbon emission they are doing through, and satellites you can capture it. So all those things are, sometimes I think we are in a silo.
Quite
ESG department works separately, tries to do initiatives, and supply chain works very independently. If these two have to come together, for the future.
Chris, maybe point us 1, 2, 3 skill sets, what you believe needed for the digital AI-driven supply chains.
I think you've got to be curious. So, if we've got people in our teams and ourselves as well, if we're not curious in this AI age, then I think we're going to get stuck, because AI is developing at the rate of knots. What AI is today was very different to what AI was a year ago, 3 years ago, and definitely 5 years ago.
Sure.
So we're going to be curious. I think you've got to be pretty data and analytical savvy. You think AI is going to give you all the answers, but you also need to check that AI is giving you things that kind of make sense as well. And then finally, I think we've got to be good communicators as well. How we put things into AI and how we get things out of AI, I think we've got to be pretty savvy how we do that.
I like that one, curiosity, data savvy, and the last one you mentioned was the communication, absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move on to the next part of our discussion, is this innovation really, what it does look, because every organization is trying to transform itself, bring in some new forms of innovations. It could be in terms of new operating models, it could be in terms of new commercial outcomes, or maybe like something beyond, like use of new platform or software. So I'm going to start with Zoe. What do you expect to achieve in terms of the innovation for your organization at PepsiCo, and your thoughts on those, please?
Well, I can tell you what I've done in 1 year. So started PepsiCo in February last year, and I think in terms of the current state, so we'd implemented S/4HANA. That was quite painful, but what I'm really pleased about is that the team didn't put any workarounds. They made the system work. And then our service was hit, and we were really quite low service, and we were on our journey last year. And I came in as a new VP and said, right, okay, we're going to look at a diagnostic and a transformation. This is the third company I've been in, and so I'm laughing because one of the PepsiCo teams in the back, but I did a really big diagnostic, and it has to be holistic. It has to be around people, process, systems, digital data, because all four mesh together to get your transformation or your innovation. And then you have to work through the interdependencies between all four. Cut a long story short, we did the diagnostic, we came up with a strategy, but then you've got to make people believe. So I've got 4,500 people in my organisation, frontline, manufacturing snacks, so Walkers, Monster Munch, Doritos, porridge, etc. And I'm also working senior all the way up, not to the CEO yet, I've only been here a year, but all the way up. And it's that communication and that change management that I can sell the innovation and the transformation to the senior guys, because I'm asking for money, but how I'm also exciting the front line, and having that enterprise thinking, having that change management and the softer leadership skills, I would say, because I can't innovate on my own. But if I get the people underneath me and the people underneath me and the people underneath me, you saw this morning about the tipping point with the people dancing. That is how you get innovation to stick. That is how you get transformation.
So I like this concept of people, systems, and process coming together as part of the innovation. Fantastic. James, I'm going to move on to the next question to James, really. We are a lot talking about agentic AI, lots of today's presentations revolving around agentic AI. But does it really add value to supply chain businesses? Is it a hype or a value? And this could be a question for open discussion as well once we have a question answer session. But I'll first of all ask James to answer this one, please.
I think it flows on quite well from what you just mentioned, and I've maybe mentioned the roundtables earlier today, so probably maybe repeating myself, but I'm a big believer in the idea of value execution versus value creation. And I think what we're trying to do is unlock more and more value creation from our teams. I had an old manager who once said, every bum in seat counts, right? And I can't have half a bum in a seat. It's a pretty basic way of putting it, but I think everyone here can count that if you went to your leadership team now and asked them for more headcount, they'd probably say no, or at least it'd be quite a long process to get that right. So it's not about replacing our people, it's about moving them away from that day-to-day value execution, which is how you do stand out at the beginning, is how you do your job well. You have to do it well to promote yourself, to move forward. But how do we add more and more value creation to our team's day, their week, their time? How do you have more and more situations where they have the time to step back and say, oh, there's an opportunity there, James, can I look into it? Yes, go for it, right? Versus your team being busy doing the value execution day to day, and you're the one saying to them, go look at this as well. And so I think what agentic AI can add to that is the efficiency, is the time back into our team's days to unlock more value creation.
conscious of the time. I'm going to jump on to the next question and start with Neha in terms of what sort of foundational capacities or capabilities are you preparing for this AI generated or AI driven supply chain? So any thoughts, whether it's like, capability development in terms of data, process standardization, governance, integration, or anything within your organization?
I think because I've studied extensively AI from Oxford, I tried to learn a lot. That also the data definitely. I think it's not a new news. Data, everybody wants clean data, and somehow all the companies which are selling AI tool, they focus on the tool itself, not one step before that. The cleaning data tool is needed, which is not many companies offer. But definitely data. But one thing I miss when I see these implementation of model is people capability, because usually what organization expect is that somebody will come like a magic they will implement the tool and things will start running. That doesn't happen. Your own in-house team also need to understand basics of AI. So before you
definitely.
call somebody from outside to do the magic, your inside internally the capability. So you have to pick and choose right change agents and the people who are enthusiastic to learn AI basics and be ready to drive those transformation, because somebody coming from outside may know AI but may not know your processes.
Yeah.
So that right people and data.
That's helpful. Chris, if you have got any thoughts on this one, what kind of
So-
capabilities?
So in my experience on AI, you've got to have the data right. Probably sounds obvious, but you've got to have the data right. I think before AI, we all know that if you just have traditional systems and you put crap data in, you get crap output. And it's exactly the same with AI, just amplified. So you've got to get the data right, and I know we're probably preaching to the converted here. But to get the data right, you've obviously got to have the governance. You've got to have standard process. So in our organization with 100 countries, where if you've got different processes in all those countries and you're trying to put the data and clean it up and give something meaningful into AI, that's not going to happen. So you've got to standardize your process as well. And I'll just say that the standardization of process as well isn't just about the cleanliness of the data. If you standardize your process, you're going to leverage your scale. You're going to be able to benchmark. You're going to be able to up your performance each day. So I think the standardized process leading into clean data and then leading into AI is really the approach that we're taking.
That was quite clear, Chris. Thank you. Suleiman, if you've got any other additional capabilities which you would like to add to Chris'
Well, I think
discussion.
it was already mentioned that the foundational capability is the data standardization tied to unified planning spine, if wherever it's possible. Because we are seeing a lot of examples, even in my previous company as well, that people are investing a lot for AI, for digital twins, without really just fixing the basics. And that's just like a very expensive investment. Unless you just solve the basics data problem, I think will be a failure in the end.
Yeah.
Data standard, when we say data standardization, it means like we need to have a similar way of creating SKUs. The hierarchical structures should be standardized as much as possible.
Right.
Because with the standard data, I think it is what turns AI from pilot to a large scale in the enterprise-wide organization. It was already mentioned, the governance and ownership.
Yeah.
Without any governance and ownership, the things doomed to fail.
Definitely.
Those are what I
Yeah,
can
no,
say.
that's quite helpful, Suleiman. So all of you have been working mostly as in the role of senior supply chain, so more of the chief supply chain officer role. And I would like to understand, in this particular specific role, what are the 2 or 3 enterprise-wide decisions which you have driven within your organization? And what is that you would put forward to the board beyond this, the conventional KPIs of cost and service to drive your business operation? So let's start with Chris and then James and anybody else who would like to pick up on these questions.
So I sit on the board leadership team of a big business unit within McDonald's, $12 billion business unit. And I would say the first one is demand. Okay, so for anyone who's leading a supply chain function, you've got to be sitting at the table shaping demand. If you're not shaping demand, you're just accepting demand. And it's someone saying, hey, guys, just deliver it. And if you do deliver it and you manage to do it without a lot of cost and you manage to do it without issues, I'm going to say you're doing that by accident. Okay, so you've got to be there at the top table shaping demand. The second one is, I think, shaping the supply piece. And I don't think it's just down to all of us as supply chain people to just set up the supply chain, how much we're investing, where we're locating facilities, which suppliers we're dealing with, etc. We need to make sure that we're setting up that supply chain with the backing of the board, right? Otherwise, they won't know what the limitations are, and they'll say, well, I just thought you could deal with it. So I think that supply piece is important. And then the final one for me is investment. We don't, even for a company like McDonald's, you still have finite capital funds to invest. I think the temptation at the board level sometimes is to invest in what is customer facing, like the restaurants or the stores or the retail outlets. Yeah. But I would say maybe it's possible that if you're going to invest 50 million of capital into a few retail outlets versus 50 million maybe into a distribution center, maybe that 50 million in the distribution center is going to give you that room for growth and that return on investment greater than building 2 new stores. So those are the 3 things that I would say you bring to the table.
Quite clear again, spot on. James, if you'd like to briefly, conscious of the time,
Of course, I'll do my best to bring up new points because Chris covered some really good ones, but also sounded like a broken record myself, which is around where senior supply chain leaders should sit for enterprise program or topics is talent. I think we need more and more people to find supply chain sexy and vice versa, right? We want our talent to have a cross-functional career. That's how you have the strongest leaders when they get to the senior level. So I think having our senior supply chain leaders involved in the talent strategy for a business is critical. And then I'll come back to profitability when it comes to a KPI to the board. Cost and service are the key things that drive a supply chain, and from a logistics perspective particularly, which absorbs most of the cost and or at least variable cost, and is the service a customer feels the most of the time. If we're driving profitability, we're ensuring that the business is thinking as one rather than siloed stakeholders. So it's about how do we impact the bottom line, not how do we impact our particular function.
Suleiman, maybe quickly in terms of your thoughts.
Absolutely. One more thing that I would like to say is that I think portfolio decisions is also very critical. I'm not saying that the supply chain need to dictate what needs to be sold, but I think we need to be able to show, let's say, as from a cost to serve perspective, or from a complexity, or from a long tail perspective, we need to be able to tell which SKUs just are not efficient to produce, are just not bringing money. Sometimes business can be very obsessed with the top line, but we need to be able to at least help them to see the pains or just the profit leakages so they can understand those products are not bringing any money. And if maybe even for the investment decisions, I think it's critical. Before making an investment decision, we need to know that if any of our lines is blocked with the long tail, which is not bringing, maybe if we cut it, maybe we can delay the investment decision.
Zoe, if you have got any final thoughts on this one.
So working for PepsiCo, we have to look at our customer base, and some of the things that we're having to go to the board is, well, what's shifting dynamics? So customers want affordability, they want health. We've got the GLP jabs that people aren't wanting as much products anymore. But it's one of the things that a supply chain can do, and I'm doing it at the moment, is how supply chain can support all of that. So how we can support new technologies with protein and fiber in our manufacturing, but we need the equipment to do it. How we can reduce costs, that brings in automation and digitalization. But the biggest thing for me is around supply chain being the unlock now, as opposed to just doing what the company wants to do. So they're the kind of things that we need to go into the board, rather than kind of saying, okay, you want this. It's us coming to the table with, actually, we've got this solution. This is what we need to do, guys. And then having that end-to-end discussion to get to solution.
I think everybody probably agrees that supply chain has become quite a big term since COVID. And it has become pretty much a part of boardroom kind of activity. So definitely something which supply chain managers and people sitting here as well has got quite a significant amount of influential capabilities to drive the business. So what we are going to do is now, for the next 5 minutes or so, is open the floor for any questions you may have to our panelists. You can fire an open question or a specific question. Please feel free to do that. Thank you. Yeah.
Hello, Arnaud Dourlan, Global Head of Clinical Supply for Sanofi. Just want to raise a question bridging the beginning and the end of the discussion between resilience and KPIs. I fully agree on the fact that it's the most adaptable company that will succeed in the next 5-10 years. And it will be the balance between the efficiency and the resilience that will be an important trigger. but I'm sometimes struggling to find ways to discuss with my ex-com on the resilience or the strengths of my network. Because, you know, we have the service level, we have inventory value, we have many KPIs, but to come on our KPI, I'm very interested to get your insight on how to discuss resilience or strength of your supply network at XCOM level with some figures, value, the way you handle it or the way you measure it would be really interesting for me. Thank you for
quite
this.
an interesting one on efficiency versus resilience. So anybody would like to pick up on that question, please?
See, I can start and maybe Chris with your cost thing, like we can close. But see, resilience is not always involving cost. Sometimes understanding the right backup chain itself is a resilience. It is not always that you're keeping stocks ready and things ready and extra people in your team. No. But suppose, like example, I have two people in my team. One is the main person, but the other person also knows that instrumentation, that programming. So if this person crashes and if a program in the company crashes, the digital, this person should know. It can be as simple as that. But again, you have to start from the structure. People resilience, digital resilience, your supplier, your manufacturing. So you should know what the decision you need to trigger at the time of crisis. You need not to sit on a pile of material or pile of FG or extra suppliers to always trigger that, have that resilience. It need not to be always cost intensive. You need to have right trigger points that what should be your go-to decision.
Thank you. Chris, you want to add something?
I was on a couple of round tables today, and there was conversations about resilience, and someone said, my board won't, allow me to do dual supply, and I asked the question, didn't I? Like, has anything gone wrong with your supply chain so far? No. I said, just wait until it does, because then they'll understand soon enough. But I would say it reminds me of sustainability 15 years ago. Sustainability, yeah, why do we need to do this? And I was one of those believers, and I think many of us probably with a bit more foresight at that time thought as well, that sustainability wasn't a nice to have, it was a must do. And we're seeing that now, right, 15 years later. I think with resilience, it's the same thing. For those that don't see it, okay, wait until it goes wrong. But I think we'll be looking back on it saying, oh my God, I wish we'd had dual supply. I wish we'd built this. I wish we did that. So I think that's the parallel I'd draw.
Just one more question potentially, or maybe two questions, if you guys are happy to slightly run over beyond 5 o'clock. Yes, please.
Sorry.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So this is Anand from Helion. The question is little bit of elephant in the room. Supply chain was managed on paper years ago. It moved to Excel. We mastered Excel. It moved to ERP. We mastered ERP. But at every change level, there was resistance and there was fear. Are we in the phase of resistance and fear to embrace AI, or this is something different?
That's quite an interesting question.
I think there is a fear, definitely, when I talk to my teams. But at the same time, people have accepted that it will come. So now, like I'm as a line manager encouraging them, that please learn about this. Even Diageo itself is organizing a lot of trainings, in-house trainings for people to become at least the basics of AI, how the AI functions, and also resistance will be always there to every change. But people know that it is like, when people move from PC to laptops, you had to. So something like that, you have to move it to it.
Suleiman, briefly, maybe if you would like to add.
No, I think there is a resistance because I think it's also amplified a lot with the news that we are just reading every day. It's just making people scared in terms of losing their jobs, etc. But I think, first of all, we need to acknowledge that there is this fear. But I think when we are working with our teams, we need to be able to just give the message in a way that it's not just about reducing the number of people, it's about being efficient. So I think, as we say, just upskilling or reskilling of our peoples, right?
Quite helpful.
And that's why maybe we will still need people to run the operations, but they may need to do something different.
Yeah.
So I think it shouldn't be about a fear or a resistance, but it should be about understanding the reality, because whether or not we accept it or not, it will happen.
No,
but what matters is that how we are adopting ourselves, how we are upskilling ourselves. Maybe what we are doing today will change. Maybe 30, 40% of our jobs will change. And so we need to prepare ourselves for the future.
Now, just conscious of the time, we are run out of the time, but then the panelists will be around here if you would like to continue. Apologies for those who I could not provide the right kind of opportunity. But can I have a big round of applause for our panelists, really? Thank you very much for your attendance and some of the questions. And once again, thank you very much, James, Zoe, Neha, Chris, and Suleiman for being here and providing some insightful discussion. Thank you very much, and goodbye for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhi.